Dog refuses to let officer pass until he follows him. The snow piled high across the street as he drove through. It was well past 8 in the morning, yet the sun was still hidden behind layers of clouds. He was almost out of the neighborhood when his sight caught a black dog pacing up and down further up the street. Curious at what was happening, he slowly drove closer and investigated. What he found would send him calling for backup. Levi Whitman was your average police officer in New York City. A man of the law for more than 2 decades, Levi loved everything about his job. Serving in New York for half of his career, Levi had seen everything the city had to offer. But what he'd find that morning would be a first in his career. When Levi enrolled to become a policeman, he'd only ever wanted to serve and protect. He started his career in Chicago before changing stations after 10 years. There was nothing Levi loved more than being a police officer. To him, a chance to help the locals of New York was everything he ever wanted in his life. So when he found that black dog wandering the cold streets on a snowy day, he knew he needed to investigate. Levi had always been a dog person. He had a 5-year-old German Shepherd he loved to the stars and back at home. When he saw that dog braving the cold morning snow that day, he didn't care whether it was a stray or a dog out for a stroll. He decided then and there to try and get it to a warmer place. He had no idea what he was bargaining for. That fateful morning started like any other for Levi. He woke up early and ran through his morning routine. By 7, he was on his way to the station to go through the day's objectives before his morning patrol. The station was almost full when Levi arrived, even though half the streets in the neighborhood were impassable because of the night snowfall. Though he knew he should wait for the city sanitation department to cater to the snow, he felt like he needed to be out there patrolling. The city's sanitation department was usually in charge of taking care of snow whenever it got out of control. For the most part, Levi's department usually sat back to wait until the streets were passable before they could patrol. But today, Levi felt something drawing him outside. It was too cold to be walking out as the sun hadn't shown its face yet, but that pull became stronger the more he thought about not going. At 8:30, Levi hopped into his cruiser to cater to the burning feeling within him. He'd never been one to believe in coincidences or to ignore his gut feeling. After downing a quick cup of hot coffee, he kicked the cruiser into gear and started his patrol. He drove slowly as the sanitation department had only begun defrosting the streets. The morning was still cold and white, but he saw a stark black spot in the distance as he drove. At first, Levi thought he was looking at a garbage bag. But then the bag began moving, pacing up and down the street. It was a dog. Levi didn't pay it much mind at first. New York had many dogs owners who let their dogs go out to play from time to time. But as he got closer, Levi noticed something that made him step on the gas. Levi could tell the pup was in distress as someone who had a dog at home. It was whining and barking, pacing and panting. Knowing he'd spook it if he pulled up too aggressively, Levi parked his cruiser on the side of the street and hopped off. What he'd find would send chills colder than the snow around him up his spine. Levi neared as carefully as he could. He lowered down, calling the dog to him. When the dog didn't go to him, he resolved to continue nearing. The dog stood alert as he took his next step. Its ears perked up and its body grew stiff. It bared its teeth, but Levi didn't stop. He had no clue what he was walking toward. The dog stopped barking, seemingly realizing Levi was not stopping. It whined and returned to pacing, barking louder as if telling him to hurry. When Levi increased his steps, the dog tore off. Levi stopped, dumbfounded at what was happening. But then the dog appeared again and barked at him, disappearing past the snow again. It dawned on Levi that the dog wanted him to follow. Where was it leading him? Levi wasted no time. He dashed forward, disappearing behind the mounds of snow. What he ran into made him slide to a stop. Before him stood the black dog, whining next to a woman who was out cold on her porch chair. What was happening? The dog barked at Levi, and he jumped into action. The first thing he did was check the woman's pulse. He couldn't feel any, but instead of panicking, he took off his coat, covered her, and sprinted back to his cruiser to call for backup. Luckily enough, there was another officer nearby who came to help Levi. Together, they called the neighborhood's trauma team center as they helped the woman into the house. But it didn't stop there. Levi and his fellow police were able to locate the woman's name and call her next of kin. They found her daughter, a student at the local college, and informed her of her mom's condition and their dog's heroic deed. They informed the daughter a team would be coming to take her mom to the emergency room, giving her the location. As the paramedics arrived to take the woman to the hospital, Levi realized his job was far from done. Seeing that the woman's dog would be left alone at home, Levi took him into his cruiser and trailed the ambulance to the hospital. After a few hours, the woman regained consciousness. Her doctor revealed her heart condition had caused the incident. Everyone thanked Levi for what he'd done. But he said all praise should go to the dog, Bruce, whose cleverness spurred him into action.